Okay, so I actually been thinking about this a lot ever since I made this video on the rough transition of 3D Sonic and also the rough transition of Pokemon. And trust me, there's a reason why I'm mentioning Pokemon in this case, because if you're a Sonic fan, you gotta understand how the Pokemon fans feel. And in this case, we're gonna be pitting against 2D Sonic and 3D Sonic, because I think it's high time we figured out why is it that sometimes we prefer one and sometimes we prefer the other one in this weird love-hate relationship we have going with the Blue Blur. Now, for starters, I was debating on either scripting this video, but at the same time, we're Sonic fans. When did we ever decide to read something that we know is not gonna make a lasting impact on the franchise? And in this case, I just have to speak my mind, okay? I have to really think about which one do I prefer. And why is it that we just constantly have this back and forth in terms of like, oh, classic Sonic is better, or just 2D Sonic is better, or modern Sonic does this better, or you know, all that stupid intellectualism that somehow works for a hedgehog that runs fast and not in, I don't know, a ethics class in university. But hey, it is what it is at the end of the day, so this is what we're doing. So now, the topic in question, 2D versus 3D Sonic, or as I like to put it in the title of the video, classic Sonic versus modern Sonic. And I have to preface this so badly. I like both franchise, like not both franchise. I like both versions of Sonic. You know, it's like 2D Mario and 3D Mario. They both have their charms. They both have their quirks. Same thing with 2D and 3D Pokemon. As I stressed in that video, they have their quirks. And with classic Sonic and modern Sonic, or you know, just 2D Sonic and 3D Sonic, there's a lot of good and bad things that both styles have. And in regards to the verses of this video, it's more so about the future of each, you know, style of Sonic game. The future of a 2D Sonic game and the future of a 3D Sonic game, which honestly, I can make those as separate videos at the end of the day. But in regards to this argument right here of which one is technically better, if we're gonna pin against each other and figure out who's the victor in this case, I gotta be honest, 2D Sonic probably does win in this argument. For argument's sake, I think classic Sonic, I think 2D Sonic just does a better job at illustrating what makes a Sonic game a Sonic game. And look, don't get me wrong, my favorite Sonic games are typically the 3D ones, you know. Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure 2, Shadow the Hedgehog. I do include that as a Sonic game, by the way. It has Sonic in it. Just because you play as Shadow, okay, you know, just putting that out there. But I grew up with the 3D games, you know. I do love them. They are some of my favorites of the entirety of, you know, the Sonic franchise. But I do have to pay respects to what the classics have done. You know, Superstars, regardless of how I felt about it in my review on it, I kind of prefer playing that more so than going back to Sonic Frontiers. And I think it also ties down to the level of simplicity of how a 2D Sonic game works. You know, like you would want to go back and replay Sonic Mania again, or you would want to go back and replay Sonic 3 and Knuckles, or you know, Sonic CD, or the Advanced Trilogy. You would want to go back to that because there is just a level of simplicity that the game expects you to have, and you don't have to, you know, turn your brain on to have a good experience. Like, you just know that Sonic's gonna go from point A to point B. There's no objectives in some cases, and there's no story that really matters, as opposed to a 3D game where there's a story that flows regardless of its simplicity or complexity of that story. There is something for you to indulge in the meantime you're going through those stages. But with 2D Sonic, it's like Sonic has to go defeat Eggman, go beat Eggman, go through these really cool zones, you know, for two times, by the way, Act 1 and Act 2, sometimes 3 if you go back to, you know, the original Sonic game in 1991, and you know, and that's it. That's the simplicity of a 2D Sonic game, and it works. And that's why I think a lot of people prefer to lean on a 2D Sonic game and prefer classic Sonic rather than modern Sonic, because that is what makes it work. But you also have to understand that 3D Sonic kind of has the upper leg in some cases, because it would allow a level of character development and again that narrative to flow through. It gives more of a reason to play these games, not just because of simplicity and replay value, because trust me, you do have that in a 3D Sonic game, don't get me wrong. Like, you do want to go back and play Sonic Adventure 2 for the emblems. I mean, Alpha Rad kind of did that and showcased how fun it could be sometimes, especially when you break the game in half. Or, you know, when you look back at, you know, Sonic Colors and the Red Rings, and also Sonic Forces and the Red Rings, and Sonic Frontiers and the Red Ring. They really love the Red Rings, don't they, with 3D Sonic? But my point being with 3D Sonic in this case is that 3D Sonic just allows more of a characterization of Sonic to flow through, and that's why I think a lot of people sometimes prefer the 3D games as opposed to 2D games, because it's more of like being engaged in a narrative sense. It's being engaged with the characters and their personalities as opposed to being engaged with the gameplay, as would a typical platformer would typically do. But again, that's just how it is. And so in that case, I would argue that modern Sonic does a better job in that aspect, but it does kind of hinder a lot in its gameplay design and its gameplay loop, especially considering the fact that it's not as consistent as a classic Sonic game or as a 2D Sonic game. Because, for example, if you compare Sonic Advance with Sonic CD or Sonic Mania, they typically have the same formula, you know, it's still the same loops, it's still the same traps, the same gimmicks, the same control style, you know. Sonic Advance Sonic still has the spin dash, he kind of has a homing attack in Sonic Advance 2, which is the only time he has it, but like you still have the same mobility as classic Sonic does in the classic Sonic games, but you know, now in a modern redesign. So that's what makes those games, the classic Sonic games, work. And with 3D Sonic, like I said, to go back to my rough transition video of them, it's just different play styles in every single game. Like Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure 2 are notorious for this because you have 3 different play styles in one game and 6 different play styles in another. So it's insane about the amount of like having to shift gears from playing as Sonic to then playing as Knuckles and then playing as Tails and then suddenly playing as a robot, and all of a sudden you have a fishing minigame that doesn't really work. It just feels overstimulated and it doesn't feel as fun as it should have. And you know, as much as I love Sonic Heroes, that's how I kind of feel with Sonic Heroes sometimes. And that's also how I feel with Shadow the Hedgehog, with the fact that you can now use guns in that game, which is just insanity. Like, it's just insane how we had Sonic Heroes in 2003, and then all of a sudden we had Shadow the Hedgehog in 2005. Like, they have the same engine, but one's just different. But again, to tie all this back in terms of 2D versus 3D Sonic, honestly, again, it's a matter of preference. You know, I've kind of rested my case here, Your Honor, if we were to go all Ace Attorney up on this bitch, but it's just a matter of like, which one do you prefer at the end of the day? In my case, I kind of prefer the 2D games in terms of like the simplicity of it, in terms of their nature, the go-to replay value that they have, and the fact that you don't necessarily have to learn 20 different mechanics just to play the game properly. And in terms of the 3D games, I like how they characterize Sonic, or at least up until the meta era, and then obviously they brought it back with Sonic Frontiers. So yeah, it's just a matter of preference here at the end of the day, and probably in a more scripted video, I'll probably talk a little bit more about 2D Sonic and 3D Sonic and just the things that they did right and the things that they do wrong, and probably throw a little bit more jokes in up in that bitch and whatnot, you know. You know how it is with YouTube. But in any case, these are my rambles. These are my unscripted thoughts about 2D and 3D Sonic. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below about which one is your favorite, which one do you prefer, which one do you think is better, or do you think that classic Sonic deserves to live, or is there too much classic Sonic? Do your usual Sonic community spiel in the comments, but be respectful, because just like the Pokemon community, I know what you are. Man, what a way to end the video, am I right?